Okay, so now I'm going to start to lay out my tenon. I've got my framing square here, and we're actually going to be doing an 8-on-12 pitch for this structure. And all of your paperwork, it actually calls for a 6-on-12, but we decided to change it to an 8. So what I'm going to do is I've got my framing square here, and I'm going to set my one side at 8, bring the other side to 12. Now when you do this, you have to make sure you have enough material over here to actually create your tenon. But you don't want to waste too much material either. So there I'm set for 8-on-12. I'm going to strike a line, and this will be the cheek. So now what I need to do is I need to find my center point. So I'm at 7 1/4 long, so that's going to put the center at 3 5/8. So this whole line is 7 1/4 long, center is going to be 3 5/8. Now from this center point, I'm going to lay out my tenon. Which is going to be 4 inches this direction. And what I want to do is the tenon is going to be,
this is that 2 fifths the,
this is 2/5 the stock width, which turns out to be 2 5/8. We're going to go 2, or I'm sorry, it's 2 3/8. 2 3/8. Now to create the rest of the tenon here, I'm just going to set myself to 8-on-12 again. Strike a line. So this is the tenon length, and all I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my framing square to line myself up on these other 2 marks that I've made. Keeping things nice and square. So this here is the tenon, and all of this material is going to go away. So now what I want to do is, just like when I laid out the tenon for the crossbeam, I'm going to actually transfer these lines all the way around so I can repeat the layout on the other side.
nice knot right there.
Yep. So instead of just connecting these marks, I want to double check and make sure that it is still an 8-on-12 pitch. So I'm going to come over here, set myself to 8-on-12. You can see the marks are just slightly off a little bit, which is just a result of the timber not being totally square. we still have our 2 3/8 inch long tenon. Okay. So same as before, mark my center point. There it is. All this goes away, and here's our tenon.
I know you showed them this, but if we flip this over, does it get close enough so they can see kind of? Okay.
So you can see, here's our laid out tenon, and this is ultimately what it's going to look like when it's all done. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to take this material off the end here, and then I'll lay out the tenon thickness, which is right here in this direction. I'll lay that out on the either side of this timber, transfer the lines around, and then we'll make our cuts.
This is my job, I get to actually cut this off. On my Boston accent, I can saw it off. Ready for it?
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to lay out the tenon thickness here. So I've got a 6 1/4 inch timber, so 3 1/8 is my center line. So now I'm just going to lay out a 2 inch thick tenon all the way around. Okay, so now we've got the tenon pretty much laid out here. I'm also going to carry these lines around too. So this is the end of our tenon. All this goes away, and this piece too. This goes away up here too. You can see that we're gonna have to cut here, here, and then these top and bottom. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take my circular saw and I'm actually gonna set the depth, so then that way the tenon's here in the middle, and I'll do a series of bread cuts along the top side and the bottom side, just like I did for the tenon on the crossbeam. So I'll set the depth of my blade so it doesn't cut into my tenon.
Down just a tad. Can you go just? Yeah, good. That's good. Let's take that off.
I'm just going to repeat that same process on the other side. And now we're going to just start to remove this material first. If you can see how I made these cuts. So now it's taking the bulk of the material away. So when I need to cut out, a little hard to see because of the lines now, but when I have to come and take these sections out here to create the rest of the tenon, if I take this material out first, it's less you have to cut down here. It's just making the job a little easier. So now we're going to...
So I get to do my task, which is kind of just breaking these away a little bit, not peeling them off. Because it's thin enough, it breaks off pretty easily. We're gonna have to start chiseling off some of this excess material. Can't get these last two quite yet. Saves a lot of time by Steve doing those bread cuts. I still have my line here that I can work towards. I'll cut a little bit for you, just kind of give you the idea. You've seen this on some of the other stuff. Keep in mind that had this project gone forward, we would have actually needed to do this 12 times. For the purpose of what we're doing for this semester, to shorten this up a little bit so that it's manageable for Steve and I, we only have to make 4 of these. Material in this particular location right here, there's a knot. You can kind of see the different color in the grain structure, a little thicker, denser wood. But again, this chisel's pretty sharp. I can kind of angle that chisel down a little bit. Sometimes these knots get into locations that cause a little bit of work for the timber framer, or depending where it's at. This one's not too bad. Again, keeping the tooling sharp helps a lot.
And in the long run, we don't necessarily have to worry about this knot too much, because by the time we carry our lines up and around, a good portion of it's actually going to go away. So structurally, the tenon's going to be in good shape. If you have a knot too big in the middle of a tenon, it's going to weaken that tenon, and then you really shouldn't be using it. So you always have to be mindful of knot locations when you're doing this.
So I'm actually hoping the other instructors that are out there, Keith Catanzaro, John Amatrano, and Dave Cameron, you guys are all practicing this at home, I'm sure. So. All right, I'm going to stop only because Steve can go on to the next step. There's a little bit more that needs to be cleaned up, but you get the idea of us cleaning that.
So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you the layout because we still need to clear the other side before we actually make the cuts. But what I was talking about carrying these lines around, we need to make sure to bring these lines up here to actually mark out our tenon. So, well, that knot ends up a little bit on that tenon, but that knot doesn't go all the way through. It's not on the other side, so it's just a portion of this, so we'll still be okay. So this material and this material will be taken out with a handsaw and then cleaned up with a chisel. But we still need to clear the other side first just to make it easier. So now instead of trying to cut through 6 inches of material here to cut these corners out, once we clear this side, we're only cutting through 2 inches. Makes it far easier to manage. So we're going to go ahead and get this material cleaned up, and then we'll come back and show you some of the cuts.